Good morning. It is 7:23. Welcome back to Great Day for this Tuesday, 14th of July. And this time every week, we talk a little politics with our party scoopers here. Craig Robertson and Jeff Link are here representing each side. Each one has their own political party that they're fond of, Jackie.
That's right. Now, this morning on a couple other stations, we were here live and talking about local things going on. But nationally, President Barack Obama came on a few stations to talk about the Iran deal that was kind of finalized overnight while we were sleeping. But some, you were saying this morning, some Republicans have already come out against it yesterday. So can you kind of guys keep us up to date on what's going on with that?
Yeah, so it was sort of big news. The President announced this morning that we've reached a historic agreement with Iran to reduce the amount of nuclear weapons that they have, nuclear material that they have, excuse me. And I think the basic framework of the agreement is that, and by the way, this is the United States plus 5 other countries have reached this agreement with Iran, and basically they're going to eliminate 98% of the uranium that they have now that could be used for weapons. They're going to eliminate 2/3 of the centrifuges they have, which allows them to produce more uranium over the course of the next 10 years. In exchange, the countries, the United Nations Security Council and the countries in this agreement are going to reduce the sanctions against Iran, and it's going to unfreeze assets that have been frozen for Iran, which has really just crippled their economy. And so it's a historic agreement. No one thought that anyone would be able to negotiate the terms of this agreement. And obviously there are people that are in favor of this agreement. There are people opposed to this. The Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, has already come out and said this is a dark day in history. I think all the Republican candidates will probably be opposed to this. This agreement has to be ratified by the Congress, and so with the Republicans in charge of the Congress, that will be sort of an interesting conversation that goes forward about whether do we want to have a 10-year agreement on monitoring and sort of controlling what happens in Iran, or do we just want to let them go unfettered in a way that might trigger a war? And so I think it's going to create an interesting discussion in the presidential race, and it's going to create an interesting discussion among all the candidates about what's going to happen. This is a very big deal. I mean, in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Bloomberg this morning all described this as a historic accord.
So what are we hearing on the other side of the fence?
Well, I do think this is a big deal, but I think that the big problem, I think, for Republicans and other countries like Israel is when you make a deal like this, can you trust it? I mean, you have a country like Iran who has publicly stated numerous times that they want to annihilate the country of Israel. They don't say pleasant things about us. And so a deal is only as good as both sides are in terms of honoring it. And I have no doubt that the United States would honor their side of the deal. But the question is will Iran really honor its deal? And will Iran continue to fund groups in the Middle East that are, hostile to countries like Israel, who cause real disruptions in that region? And so I think this is why Republicans are skeptical of it. And does this set us? And look, I haven't really been able to, I woke up and got here and thought I did well this morning, so I'm not well versed on it.
I mean, this is something that I think a lot of us are still confused by.
This is a real, I mean, you really have to unpack something like this and say, okay, if we agree to it, it's not just what we get in the immediate 10 years. What are we setting ourselves up for? And so, I mean, a country like Iran with the leadership that it has, and another, you have an ISIS component in the region. Nuclear weapons, I mean, have to be off the table indefinitely. This isn't something, another nuclear power in the Middle East is the last thing we need, because once they have those weapons, you can't, the negotiations change. And we've seen that with other countries. Pakistan, which harbored bin Laden for years, maybe with or without their knowledge, but still, when a country has nuclear weapons, it changes the dynamic in the world. And so I think we have to be careful that whatever we agree to doesn't put Iran on the clock for them to militarize and have a nuclear weapon.
You know, the Russians have already come out and said that the U.S. should remove all their missiles from Europe because they're not needed anymore now that Iran has signed this deal. So, I mean, a lot of different things are going to happen over the next few days. I mean, I'm sort of I'm glad we signed something, but I don't trust Iran as far as I could throw them. So.
Well, you know, there are certainly elements of the deal that are going to check. I mean, we're not going to just trust them and say, thank you for signing this agreement. We'll see you in 10 years. So there will be ongoing checks, and you know, we haven't had people in Iran to verify anything,
right?
And that's been a huge part of the problem. So, I mean, I think the big difference really in approaches here is, you know, no one feels certain about what Iran is going to do or not. But the question is, do you engage and have a conversation, or do you ignore them and point weapons at them?
Right.
And I think, you know, the side that was chosen today is to engage and have a conversation. And I think that's a positive step for countries all around the world.
Now, with another Republican entering the race, now bringing it up to 15, I believe, with Scott Walker, do you think this is going to bring an entirely different shift to the conversations all these candidates are going to be having with people?
Well, I think it does, but I also think Walker's official entrance into the race will change the dynamics in Iowa. He will now have a fully engaged Iowa campaign, which we haven't seen yet this year, even though he's the front runner in Iowa. So I think his entrance into the race changes the dynamic. I think it's, you know, the Iowa field is pretty much set. We still have John Kasich, I think, to get into this race. But foreign policy is going to be a major issue throughout the Republican primary. And it's going to be interesting to see, you know, is it just going to be a lot of rhetoric, or is it going to be, you know, someone really taking the time to explain what America's role in the world should be, and how do we handle difficult situations and difficult countries and foreign governments who hate the United States and hate the country of Israel. And so I really think that there needs to be a serious discussion, not just rhetoric thrown back and forth between, you know, a baker's dozen of Republican candidates.
All right, just going to get more interesting as we get closer. It's 7:31. We'll be right back. You're watching